The baby wasn't breathing. If you're listening to this, stay with me and don't look away. Some rescues are loud. Some are violent. This one was silent. There was no sound at all. The call came in as a medical emergency, infant not breathing. No additional details, no time to ask questions. When those words come over the radio, everything else disappears. The world narrows to one fragile possibility. We arrived in under 4 minutes. It felt longer. It always does. The house was dark except for the front porch light, which flickered slightly like it couldn't decide whether to stay on. The door was already open. That's never a good sign. People don't leave doors open when everything is fine. I heard the mother before I saw her. Not screaming, not crying. That's what stopped me. Her voice was flat, cracked, repeating the same words like she was afraid silence would make them true. He's not breathing. He's not breathing. Inside, the air was heavy, warm, still. It smelled like milk, sweat, and panic. The kind of smell that settles into fabric and refuses to leave. She was standing in the middle of the living room, holding the baby against her chest, rocking slightly without realizing she was doing it. Her hands were shaking so badly, the baby's head moved with each tremor. She looked at me like I was the last thing between her and something she couldn't survive. I took the baby from her gently but firmly. I didn't ask. I didn't explain yet. Seconds matter more than permission in moments like this. The baby was limp, too limp. Skin pale with a faint bluish tint around the lips. Eyes partially open but unfocused. No crying, no movement, no sound at all. Silence is the worst sign. I laid him down on the couch because it was the closest flat surface. Not ideal, but time doesn't care about ideal. I positioned his head, checked the airway. Nothing obvious, no chest rise, no breath against my cheek. I started immediately. My hands moved from memory, not thought. Training drilled into muscle over years took over because thinking wastes time. 2 fingers, proper placement, gentle but precise pressure. Not force, control. I counted under my breath. 1, 2, 3. Nothing. I opened the airway again, tilted the head just enough. Gave 2 gentle breaths, watching closely for chest rise. Barely anything. Not enough. I felt my heart rate spike, then forced it down. Panic makes you sloppy. Sloppy kills babies. The mother hovered inches away, whispering his name over and over, her voice cracking further with each repetition. I told her to step back, not because she was in the way, but because she needed to breathe too. If stories like this matter to you, if you want to understand what real rescue looks like, stay with me. I reassessed quickly. Color wasn't improving. No spontaneous breathing. I checked the mouth again, swept carefully. Then I saw it, a small obstruction, almost invisible. Milk mixed with something else. Thick, sticky, enough to block an airway that small. I turned him over, supporting his head and neck, and delivered controlled back blows. Not anger, not desperation, precision. On the 3rd strike, something shifted. A wet sound. A gasp that barely qualified as one. Then silence again. My jaw tightened. This was the edge. I rolled him back, reassessed, and continued. Breaths, compressions, rhythm steady. Voice inside my head counting, even when everything outside was chaos. I was aware of my own body in a strange way. Sweat forming under my arms, shoulders locked tight. My breathing shallow as I tried to keep it quiet. Every sense narrowed to the baby in front of me. Then, a sound. Soft. Fragile. A weak cry that sounded more like a question than a protest. I felt it hit my chest before my brain registered it. Relief doesn't arrive gently. It crashes in and leaves you shaky. I kept going anyway. You don't stop until you're sure. Airway clear. Breathing improving but still shallow. Color slowly returning, like life was remembering where it belonged. The mother collapsed onto the floor beside the couch, sobbing now, loud and uncontrolled. That sound was almost worse than the silence had been. I handed the baby to the medic as they came through the door, briefing them in clipped, efficient sentences. Time, condition, intervention. They nodded, already working. As they took over, my hand started to shake. That always comes later. Your body waits until it knows it's allowed to feel. I stood up and felt my legs wobble slightly. I leaned against the wall for a second, pressing my shoulder into it, grounding myself. The room felt smaller now, like it was closing in around the moment that had just passed. The baby was breathing, weakly, but breathing, and we weren't done yet. The sound was weak, but it was real. And in my line of work, real beats loud every time. I didn't stop just because he made noise. That's a mistake rookies make. Sound doesn't mean stability. It just means you bought yourself a little time. I kept monitoring his breathing, counting the rise and fall of his chest, watching for any pause that lasted too long. His breaths were irregular, shallow, like his body was still deciding whether it wanted to stay in this world. I stayed close enough to feel the warmth coming back into him, but far enough to keep perspective. The medics moved in smoothly, quietly. No shouting, no wasted motion. They trusted what they saw because it matched what they'd been told. That's what good handoffs look like. Ego disappears when the priority is a life measured in ounces. They applied oxygen, checked vitals, reassessed the airway. One of them nodded slightly when the baby let out another faint cry. Not relief yet. Just confirmation we were moving in the right direction. The mother was sitting on the floor now, back against the couch, arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold herself together. Her eyes never left her child. She didn't ask questions, she didn't need explanations. She needed proof. Every breath was proof. I spoke to her quietly, slowly. Told her what we were doing. Told her what had happened without dressing it up. Parents can sense when you're lying to make them feel better. Honesty, even when it's hard, builds trust faster than comfort words. As they prepared to move him to the ambulance, his breathing faltered again. Just for a second, but long enough to tighten my chest. The medic caught it too. We exchanged a look that said everything. Not done yet. They adjusted oxygen flow, repositioned him carefully, stimulating gently. His chest rose again, a little stronger this time. Color continued to improve, pink pushing back the blue. That's when the emotional weight started to creep in, not panic, not fear, something heavier. Responsibility settling where adrenaline had been doing the work. If you're still listening, this is the part no one prepares you for. The moment after the crisis where you realize how close the edge really was. Outside, the night felt colder than it should have. The ambulance lights washed the house in red and white, over and over, like a heartbeat you could see. Neighbors had gathered at a distance, quiet, respectful, unsure what they were witnessing but knowing it mattered. I stood near the open ambulance doors as the medics worked, ready if they needed another set of hands, but careful not to crowd. Knowing when to step back is as important as knowing when to step in. The baby was secured, monitored, supported. Tubes and wires looked oversized on such a small body. He stirred slightly, making a soft noise that barely rose above the hum of equipment. It was enough. The mother climbed into the ambulance, hands shaking as she held onto the rail. Before the doors closed, she looked at me. Her mouth opened like she wanted to say something, then closed again. She just nodded. Hard. Like she was afraid if she spoke, her voice would break apart. That nod will stay with me longer than any thank you ever could. When the ambulance pulled away, the street went quiet again. Too quiet. Like the night was holding its breath, waiting to see how the story would end. Back at the station later, everything returned to routine. Gear checked. Hands washed. Reports written. On paper, the call was clean. Infant choking. Airway cleared. Transported alive. Stable at time of transfer. Paper doesn't show the silence. Paper doesn't show the color of a baby who isn't breathing. Paper doesn't record the way your hands shake afterward. I sat alone for a while, longer than usual, staring at nothing. That's when the second wave hits, the what ifs. The moments you replay, not because you regret them, but because you respect how narrow the margin was. What if we'd arrived 2 minutes later? What if the obstruction hadn't shifted? What if panic had made my hands clumsy? Experience doesn't stop those thoughts. It just keeps them from owning you. A few hours later, we got the update. The baby was stable, breathing on his own. Admitted for observation. No neurological damage evident at that point. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding since we arrived at that house. This job gives you strange gifts. You don't get to keep the people you save. You don't get to follow their lives. You get a moment, sometimes just seconds. And that has to be enough. I went home that morning with the sun just starting to come up. The world looked unfairly normal. People walking dogs, cars starting. Life continuing like nothing almost ended. I stood in my driveway for a moment before going inside, listening to the quiet, feeling the weight of the night finally settle. The baby was breathing. But the story wasn't finished yet. I didn't go to the hospital that night. That's not how it works for us. You hand off, you trust, and you step back. But even when your shift ends, your mind doesn't clock out. It stays with the call, replaying it in fragments, testing it for weak points. I slept for a few hours, then woke up before the alarm. That happens after calls like that. Your body rests, but something inside stays alert, like it's still listening for a cry that might stop again. Later that afternoon, the update came through official channels. The baby was breathing on his own. Oxygen levels stable. Doctors believed the obstruction had been fully cleared before hypoxia caused lasting damage. They weren't ready to promise anything yet. Medicine is careful with promises. But the words were enough: stable, alert, improving. I sat down when I read it. Not because I was weak, but because that's what you do when a weight finally lifts. You let your body catch up with what your mind already knew was coming. People ask sometimes how it feels to save a life. They expect something cinematic: relief, joy, pride. The truth is quieter than that. It feels like closing a door just before the storm gets inside. You don't celebrate the door. You just stand there, listening to the wind on the other side, grateful it didn't make it in. A few days later, I drove past that neighborhood on another call. Same street, same houses. The porch light wasn't flickering anymore. It was steady, small detail. But it mattered to me. I didn't stop. We're not supposed to. Boundaries exist for a reason. But I noticed a stroller in the driveway. Blue, new, clean. That was enough. This job doesn't give you closure in neat packages. It gives you glimpses. Hints that the world kept turning in the right direction after you stepped out of the frame. Over the years, I've carried a lot of sounds with me. Screams, sirens, metal tearing. Fire crackling where it shouldn't be. But silence stays with you the longest. The silence of a baby who isn't breathing. The silence before you know if your hands were fast enough, steady enough, good enough. Experience doesn't make those moments easier. It just teaches you how to stand inside them without breaking. I've trained hundreds of times for scenarios like that. Mannequins, classrooms, controlled environments where mistakes don't cost anything real. But no training replicates the weight of a parent watching you work on their child, their entire world balanced on the movement of your fingers. That's where ethics live, not in textbooks. In decisions made under pressure, when you choose precision over panic, discipline over fear. That night reminded me why we drill the basics until they feel boring. Because when the stakes are absolute, boring is exactly what you want. You don't rise to the occasion. You fall back on what you've practiced. And if you're still here listening, that's the part I want you to understand. Real rescue isn't heroic in the moment. It's controlled. It's quiet. It's doing the right thing the same way every time, even when everything inside you wants to rush. Weeks later, a card arrived at the station. No return address. Just a picture drawn in crayon, clearly by an older sibling. Stick figures. A house. A fire truck that looked more like a box with wheels. Inside the card, a simple note. Thank you for bringing our son back. I didn't keep the card. Not because it didn't matter, but because I don't collect reminders. Some people do. I respect that. For me, the memories are already permanent. I've seen rescues that ended differently. Those stories don't get told as often. They shouldn't be forgotten, but they don't belong everywhere. This one ended with breathing, with possibility, with a life that will never remember how close it came to ending. That's enough. If you want to hear more stories like this, real ones, told without filters or exaggeration, stay with me. These aren't just rescues. They're moments that define a career, and sometimes, a life. That baby won't remember my face, won't know my name, and that's exactly how it should be. But I'll remember the silence, and I'll remember the moment it broke.